Congratulations, Keir Starmer, and welcome to number 10. I hope I'll be voting for you in 5 years' time. You see, I'm pleased to see you win this election. Over the moon, in fact. But only because you ousted the last lot who frankly did a rotten job from my perspective. I'm one of those millions of swing voters who made our choice with our heads standing way over our hearts because we voted tactically. We didn't vote out of party loyalty or on gut instinct. You're not sat in Downing Street now because we think you're a nice man or because we believe in you. We made a judgment call on letting you win. I don't know you yet. I've seen things I like and dislike about you, but I recognise that even though I didn't vote for you this time, I made a choice which helped you get where you are now. If you want my vote to go your way next time, you'll need to prove your worth to me. I'm not expecting miracles, Keir, or radical policy shifts overnight. I've not just read about how slow change needs to be for societies to accept it, I've seen it with my own eyes and felt it. 5 years may be a long time in politics, but it's the blink of an eye for social progress. I've been badly hurt by decisions made by the Conservative government you're replacing. Personally hurt, over and over again, by changes to policy that meant essential services couldn't cope with demand, lacked funding, couldn't get enough staff, were held up by legal delays, tied up with procedure, farmed out to a greedy private sector, or simply shut down. I'm paying more tax than ever for less in return, and I need you and your people to get the balance right again. I don't mind paying taxes if I can see the returns around me. In my late 20s, I woke up one morning unable to walk, which is how I came to learn I was born with a degenerative spinal condition. But I couldn't fault the efforts to get me back walking and to help me manage my pain made by the NHS of the time. When I went to my GP for a routine checkup and blood test a couple of years later, I was called back in within hours and sent to hospital where I started emergency treatment for a completely separate condition that was revealed by the blood test. I went on to receive weekly treatment for months and never once had an appointment cancelled or rescheduled on me, plus continuing treatment and physio to keep me moving and working. Now, getting a face-to-face appointment with my GP is almost unheard of. Even speaking directly to a GP is a privilege these days, and where does it get you? My wife is already living with diagnoses of both EDS and ME, but she started getting dizzy all the time, falling over, walking into things and spilling drinks. After a lot of convincing and a couple of weeks' wait for an appointment, she got to see a GP who referred her to see a neurologist. That was well over a year ago, and she finally got her first offer of a neurology appointment a few days ago. She drops things a lot more now. I want that fixed, Keir. I don't just mean I want my wife to see a neurologist and get the help or treatment she needs. Of course I do, but it's more than that. I mean fixing the system enough so that in 5 years' time, nobody has to wait like she has. I want the efficiency and coordination the NHS was capable of 25 years ago back again. Thing is, there may well have been a Labour government when I got ill, but they'd only been in power for a little while then, so they can't take much of the credit. That's just how things were back then. Even Thatcher's government kept the NHS functioning. Things are much worse now, and they didn't have to get like this. So, before you start tackling any new issues, please get started on unravelling the damage to our once great National Health Service. It may have been far from perfect 20 years ago, but at least it worked. Then there's the other big one that gets brushed under the carpet for the most part, social care. I mean, that's been a big issue for me personally, as I lost both my elderly parents in the last couple of years, and both of them were woefully let down by numerous systems that used to be in place to protect us in our old age. That's the only kind of social care that ever does seem to get a mention, though, in Parliament at least. What about all the other forms of social care? What about social care for the disabled? What have you got in store for us? Once you've had your 5 years in office, will we have seen an end to the never-ending cycle of news stories about vulnerable people and children being abused in privately run homes and schools by poorly paid, undertrained staff? Will you legislate to raise standards of care? Or take it out of the hands of charities and private enterprise to make a service consistent across the UK? Will there be enough social workers to cover the caseloads, support workers to provide essential care needs, police officers to arrest the abusers, courts to prosecute them, and prisons to serve their sentences? Of course, you can't talk about health and social care without bringing up the welfare system. That's not just broken, it's completely unfit for purpose. The last government used welfare as a dumping ground for all their other failures in social responsibility, whilst the people forced to use it are pilloried by the ministers who put them there. I'll be fair, Keir. You were one of the few who tried to point out in the debates and on the campaign trail that if we restore and improve health and social care, we'll take a huge strain off the welfare system, and you're right. You didn't do quite as well as that party political by Ed Davey of the Liberals, but I did notice you trying to explain it on telly in recent weeks, before you got interrupted, of course. I know all too well how many disabled people would love to be able to earn a living, or at least do something useful if the supports were in place, if the therapies and drugs they needed were readily available on the NHS, and employers were given the training, funding and incentive to make employing disabled folks not only viable, but a privilege. I was made redundant a year ago, and I'm working my butt off up against some tremendous odds to earn my way and not be a drain on the system. If I can't earn enough to pay my bills, there simply isn't enough support in place for us to survive, let alone try to build a future. My wife's got qualifications up to her eyeballs and loved her job before she got ill, and there's nothing I'd appreciate more than to see her on her feet again and able to work. But the support she needs doesn't exist. I'm in my mid-50s and terrified of the future if things don't turn around fast. Never mind your opponent's triple pension lock. I need to know that when I'm too old and clapped out to support us, there'll still be a pension for me, a healthcare system to keep me fit to care for my wife while I can, and a social care system to provide a dignified and comfortable standard of living when eventually I can't do it anymore. Then there's housing. I said just now I'm in my mid-50s and I'm privately renting still. I've worked full-time all my adult life, and yet that so-called dream of living in a home I own myself is as distant as it was when I was a teenager. I see affordable homes being built on my doorstep, being sold for prices I couldn't afford even if I had 25 years to pay it off. And as for social housing, there's very little of it left. And of course, there's the cost of living itself. It's got out of control. We've all heard the lame excuses about COVID and foreign events from the last guys, so I'm really hoping for some action on this one. We can't fix what's gone before, but you can do a lot to stop things like that happening again. If you want me to vote for you in 5 years' time, I'll need to feel under less financial pressure to survive and have some optimism for the future. You said some things on the campaign trail that are encouraging. You're absolutely right, we need growth in industry as well as services. Trade barriers need to come down and regulation needs looking at to make sure it provides the right protections without strangling innovation. But you also know that that's just the engine of change, the motive force. The drivers that will guide us towards prosperity are what I've been talking about. All those things a functioning society needs to operate at peak efficiency so that we can have a healthy, optimistic, inclusive and motivated population with our sights set on making a better world. For me to feel that optimism, you will have to work hard, Keir, very hard. You talk of change and I know you mean it, but before we can have change for the better, we need to restore what we've lost. Right now, I don't feel that any of the political parties represent me particularly well, so I had to hold my nose and vote tactically in order to get a Prime Minister I'm unsure of. Despite those reservations, still have a tinder-dry wisp of hope tucked away deep down under all this cynicism. It's up to you to ignite that wisp, to provide me with enough sparks of inspiration and definitive action that it bursts into a bright flame of belief that we're on a path to something better. The political pundits that crowd our screens talk of how in previous elections a particular kind of voter made the difference. Big demographics with common concerns that make them a particular target for the election strategists. In the past there was White Van Man. We later had Workington Man. This time they described their target voter as Renter Ruth. Working adults living in private rented accommodation, a category you already know I'm in. But I'm also part of another demographic that's going to matter in a big way in 5 years' time, Keir. So here's your heads up for the next election. I'm also a disabled Darren, and an autistic Anne, or neurodivergent Nick. Since the last election, millions of eyes have been opened to just how poorly the sick and disabled are treated here, thanks to the willful neglect of your predecessors. That's just those of us with physical disabilities and chronic illnesses. Then there's hundreds of thousands of people in the last 5 years alone who've learned why they don't fit in, why traditional politicians sound hollow to them, and why societies always push them to the sidelines, because they discovered their neurodivergence. All of us are watching you now, Keir, waiting to be recognised and to be included in your future plans. We're a demographic that have been historically neglected by every government and political party, your Labour predecessors included, and there are millions of us. Rishi kept on going on about us in that debate you had, remember? Only his perverse ideas were about taking away benefits and support from disabled and sick folks instead of helping us get well and be productive. To be fair, Labour governments have done their bit in the past. We wouldn't have any welfare system or health service if it weren't for them. But from where we are now, you've got a clear shot at making history, Keir Starmer. Do right by us and we'll be your ace in the hole come the 2029 election. Make this country a leader, not only in social healthcare, but in healthcare and social responsibility, period. Build the National Health Service back to what it was 25 years ago and then make it better. Fix the social care system so we're not afraid of getting old or unwell anymore, and rebuild the welfare system to genuinely help those of us who need it, when we need it, and police it responsibly. I'm offering you a recipe for success here, as good a guarantee of re-election in 2029 as you're likely to get. Years of neglect have taken a toll not only on my health, morale and optimism, but that of almost everyone I know, even the healthy ones and those few who still think that the Tories weren't to blame for this mess. But you can do it differently if you choose to. There's millions of us out there suffering under the grinding heel of a society that's shown it can care in the past. But your predecessors chose to turn their backs on the vulnerable and call us sponges. They insulted us all by driving more and more healthy folks into poverty and ill health, and then calling them a drain on resources and a burden on society. A lazy bunch of layabouts abusing handouts from an over-generous system. Treat us right, Keir, and a lot of us will vote for you in 5 years' time, maybe most of us. We're not expecting utopia or handouts, just a return to sanity, to boring and reliable and accountable. It would be so nice to not be interested in politics for a little while. I want to see progress towards a system that works for all of us, regardless of who we are, what we are, how we worship, what we look like, who we fancy, or how our bodies, minds, senses, or emotions work. Show us that the people in charge, that's you now, show us you care about us, and put in place constructive policies to help us regain some of the safety and quality of life we've lost in recent years. Yes, there's plenty of other election issues people care about that I haven't mentioned, but this isn't meant to be a comprehensive breakdown of the nation's concerns, only mine, and specifically just those that hurt me the most. Foreign affairs, immigration, energy policy, gender policy, education, all of it matters, but not for today. Not for this day one message. I could go on for hours about things that need to change, but let's leave it there for now. Keir Starmer, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Millions of people like me voted tactically to get the Tories out in the hope that you and your party could do better. You're there in number 10, not because the nation believes in you or we see you as a great leader. You're there because you're the best of a bad bunch, and I think you know that. So prove to us that you really are the man for the job. That you have the vision, the intelligence, the commitment, and most importantly, the humility to be the leader this country needs. And I'll vote for you and mean it next time. Thank you for watching. If you've already liked and subscribed and would like to support the channel more, then please follow the Patreon links in the description to pledge what you feel is fair and affordable to help keep the lights on here and the content keep flowing.